Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Here we are back at it again with the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast, the Monday edition. Are we really going to do this with a British accent the whole time? No, we are not going to do that. Actually, maybe I could try my NPR voice. Haven't done that one in a while. This is all things considered here on YouTube, the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. To get stuff really close to the microphone. And we are leaving all of this in. We are not editing it off on today's edition. Welcome new and returning viewers. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast, if we have not already clearly established that. We are here each Monday and Friday on YouTube and Rumble to bring you wrestling recaps and reports on AEW Dynamite, Rampage, NWA Powerrr, weekend events, pay-per-views, news bulletins, as well as deep dives into classic content with our weekly retro review series. And if you have not done so already, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate the show for me. Help me out in the algorithms here on YouTube. All the support you can give would be greatly appreciated. And in addition to, I didn't mention this, make sure you hit the bell icon to stay notified of when our postings go up. Today for the Monday show, we have the usual AEW Rampage and NWA Powerrr report to run down. And at the end of the show, we actually have a big match to talk about for the final segment. A New Japan Pro Wrestling match, believe it or not. Haven't had a hot take on New Japan since the whole G1 debacle last year. So that'd be interesting to go down that rabbit hole again. But yes, as you can tell by the title, we are going to be talking about the Kazuchika Okada Will Ospreay IWGP Heavyweight title match from Night 2 of Wrestle Kingdom. That'll be for later on the program. But as per usual for our standard Monday show, we will talk about Rampage first from Friday night. Get that snooze fest done and over with as quick as possible, because I honestly had very little to say about that show when it was over. But you're getting variety on the FSWR podcast. So be happy, dang it. And again, if you're keeping archive footage of this for some peculiar reason, this is the January 14th edition of AEW Rampage. Opening match is Adam Cole versus Trent Beretta, which is probably the only combination of a pairing with anyone involved in this drawn-out, god-awful Best Friends Elite program that's even semi-watchable at this point. Unfortunately, because it's AEW, they can't just have Cole and Trent go out there and do a straight wrestling match without the Goon Squad at ringside. And, of course, every faction in AEW has, 15 goddamn people per group, so every match with people at ringside ends up turning into a glorified lumberjack match. And they had pretty much every standard paint-by-numbers AEW TV match you'd come to expect. Big moves galore, guys kicking out of everything in the book, people getting dropped on their heads and necks and no-selling it 30 seconds later. There's really no heat for the match. There's no ring psychology to be spoken of. It's big move, big move, big move, big move, big move, finish. And well, it kind of sucks because I expect better out of guys like Adam Cole and Trent Beretta, who have actually proven to be good workers in the past. But when you don't hire competent agents to sit the guys down and offer suggestions for laying out a decent quality wrestling match, and you just kind of let the wrestlers go out there and do fuck all with no filtering, This is pretty much what you'd come to expect modern pro wrestlers to come up with for match concepts. So, it was definitely not my flavor of match. Of course, everyone likes the no-sell, back and forth, big move spectacular. You'll probably say it was the best match in AEW history. So, we can agree to disagree and move on. We had the usual ringside brawl with the Lumberjacks. Cole won. And I can confidently say I won't remember this match ever happened by the end of next week. Shawn Spears killed a job guy in a minute. Mostly out there to hype up his match with Punk for Dynamite. And I'll admit, he actually did a halfway decent promo on Punk. But, then you realize it's Shawn Spears and he still doesn't matter. We had the routine bad women's match that really doesn't need any further elaborating on. All I can say is that when Chris Statlander is by far the single best worker in the entire match, not a good sign. By far the best part of the show was the interaction with Jay Lethal and Ricky Starks at the commentary desk. And, while I'm still shaking my head at the fact that it took AEW 2 fucking months to finally come up with something for Jay Lethal to do on TV, I will give a thumbs up to a Starks and Lethal program, even if they are essentially fighting for a fake, unrecognized title belt. But I will say this. I've watched Jay Lethal for years now, and if there's one thing that I've learned from him, particularly during his lower points in TNA, he has the ability to take pretty much anything given to him and make it work. And with the horrific state that AEW's at right now, it would kind of be nice to watch some quality wrestling on their programming that does not patently involve CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, or MJF. So I will take more Jay Lethal. And the main event for the show is the Jurassic Express defending the tag titles against the Job Orders, John Silver and Alex Reynolds. They did a bunch of moves. I'm not kidding. That's actually the one sentence I wrote down about this entire 15-minute match. They did a bunch of stuff. Of course, by the end, all 4 guys are in there trading moves, illegal tags and all. Once upon a time, I probably would have gotten pissed about that. And by once upon a time, I mean like 2 weeks ago. I just don't care anymore, to be honest with you. We all know it doesn't matter. Champs retained. Of course, the finish was botched, which I guess they couldn't just refilm on an already taped show. But here on WCW Thunder, AEW Rampage, who gives a fuck? So here's your Cliff's Notes rundown of another classic installment of Too Much Shit Going On Wrestling. Another hour of uneventful, just a bunch of stuff happening programming that ultimately builds to, just another TV show in 5 days. That's pretty much what Rampage is at this point. A bunch of random matches, most of which are rushed all to hell, most which get their entrances cut anyway, and a splurge of pre-tapes here and there. Very minimal ring promos, no really big stars, no memorable points worth talking about. Everything's just one long, drawn-out continuation of already overcycled, overblown programs. I probably could elaborate more on it if I wanted to, but is it even worth it? We've had this discussion before, I think. I still have no idea why the Elite and the Best Friends are fighting, and you're on, week 17 of this cyclical, never-ending saga. Got characters feuding on dark programming, which ends up churning out on the TV show, yet they never actually effectively explain why those characters are feuding to begin with. Why are Chris Statlander and Layla Hirsch mad at each other? I don't know. They just are. Because you have to watch Dark to know what's going on. Fuck you. But hey, look at it this way. Look how quickly we got through that report. So the shorter we can make these Rampage recaps each weekend, it'll give me more time to talk about more interesting things, especially when it comes to topical stories. At least it shows that other companies are giving effort. So there's that. So that takes us to the January 11th edition of NWA Powerrr. I believe if we're going by how they put it on Fight TV, I think they actually title these episodes by season. So I believe we would be in season 7, and this was episode either 3 or 4. I'm not really sure where we are in the archives, but I still go by dates just because that's how I'm used to doing it. But we start with Melina doing a promo with May Valentine. And I like Melina. I have nothing against her. So I think we should establish that out of the gate here. This was WWE level acting with the way this delivery came off. And I understand that professional wrestlers are not trained to be Hollywood actors, but I mean, good Lord, I've never taken an acting class in my life, and even I know when something should probably be retaped because of how fake and scripted it comes off initially. But I won't give her too much of a hard time for the acting portion. I will, however, give them a hard time for the material they tried to sack Melina with in this segment. Her fundamental premise is that even though she has already lost clean to Camille after her first title opportunity, she believes that solely based on the fact that she's a proven commodity to the business, she should not only be guaranteed another shot at the belt without having to earn it, but that she should, and I quote here, automatically always be the number one contender. I fail to see where the logic comes into play with this philosophy. So from what I gathered by the end of this, one of two things are occurring here. Either Melina's turning heel soon, or whoever wrote the idea for this segment is a numbskull. So last week we had a 4-way number one contenders match for a future shot at the junior heavyweight belt. This week it is a 4-way number one contenders match for a future shot at the women's belt. Guess they couldn't think of anything more clever, so they just figured, whatever, just take last week's concept and plug it in for this show. Guess they figured no one would notice. Whoops. Anyway, the match is Kiera Hogan, Genocide, Kenzie Page, and Christy Janes. I have no idea who Christy Janes is. I don't think I've ever seen her work a single match in the NWA, but somehow she's found her way to title contention. And I hate to go to my usual hardcover trope of modern day match description of they did a bunch of moves, but well, they did a bunch of moves. Some of it looked moderately okay. Other parts looked like day one running the ropes training day at the Performance Center. And, I mean, Kiera's the only girl in this match that's actually been getting something resembling a push on the show recently, so finish was kind of telegraphed before the bell even rang. But they have been playing up the tension with her and Mickie James on the show too, so I mean, there's a couple possibilities that could come out of it. They could have Kiera beat Camille for the belt and maybe do a program with Kiera and Mickie for the women's title. If there's a god, Kiera getting the win in the end. Of course, that's all speculative. Who really knows what they're going to do? I'm just asking questions. I don't know what's going on. I'm just asking questions. That was a horribly attempted Jesse Ventura impersonation for those wondering. We had an OGK La Rebellion Homicide pre-tape promo with May backstage. Most of the verbiage consisting of La Rebellion and Homicide taking shots at Ring of Honor and pretty much laughing at Matt Taven and Mike Bennett for losing their jobs. And they tease a fight, which then just kind of leads to May Valentine intervening and saying, "Guys, I think we've had enough for today." And they cut away. And And I know for a fact that I put more inflection into that May quote than she did. And I think I have already made a passing joke about this once before, but I think it bears repeating here. Either I have completely forgotten just how bad Homicide is at doing promos, or he was undoubtedly drunk in this segment. Believe me, I've heard enough slurred speech promo delivery in my lifetime to know when someone's pregame before a promo segment. So we cut to the booth for a Jax Dane promo. The extent to which my notes read about this are the following. Jax references something involving Anthony Mayweather, and then he starts taking jabs at the legends getting unjustified recognition. He offhandedly alludes to Jazz as being one of those said legends without specifically name-dropping her. And this somehow immediately leads to Rodney Mack, aka Jazz's husband, coming out and sucker-punching Jax in the face. Yes, conveniently, it was happenstance that Rodney Mack just so happened to be behind the curtain when Jax inertly mentions his wife on camera. I mean, in retrospect, is it a small detail? Yes. But, I mean, come on, guys. A little bit of suspension of disbelief too much to ask? Speaking of Mayweather, we had Anthony Mayweather taking on my main man, big, strong fucking Mims. And I have become a supermark for Mims on this show in the last few weeks. Tonight, however, through no fault of his own, Mims' TV segment was a pretty big step back from what I've seen from him in the last few shows. What happens is Mayweather and Mims are having a normal match, and then for reasons that are never fully explained, Mims just stopped wrestling Mayweather, and we're told that he's being hesitant and that he doesn't want to fight Mayweather. Apparently having something to do with the fact that Mayweather has been training Mims, but also dealing with the fact that Mayweather should be taking the fight to Jax Dane instead of taking his anger out on Mims. But it gets weirder than that. So let me get this straight. Anthony Mayweather is Mims' trainer, and Mims didn't want to fight Mayweather because, according to Mims' own words, Jax Dane is getting inside Mayweather's head. I guess with the idea being that Jax Dane is trying to use this match to pin Mayweather against his own student instead of taking the fight to him directly. So are we to believe that Jax Dane booked this match? And if so, that begs an even greater question. When in the hell did Jax Dane get the book in the NWA? Is he Dusty Rhodes all of a sudden? Did anyone else have any clue what the fuck was going on in this match? And above all else, it ended in a count-out finish after Mims tricked Mayweather by faking him out getting back into the ring to break the 10 count. Lame. You let me down this week, Mims. Big time. May have to resort to just calling you by your ordinary ring name Mims if you keep this kind of bullshit up going forward. Fucking Mims is a moniker that you earn through hard work, buddy. The effort on this show from you was purely Mims-worthy. We had a Scion promo hyping up his match with Judice, or Judice, however the fuck you pronounce it. And he also informed us here that his father happens to be a former NWA champion. So here's your homework over the next few weeks, folks. Continue your laundry list of probable real identities behind the Scion mask. And, well, I think the news story is that after having proved that he's unworthy of becoming TV champion, he is now going to turn his attention to higher championship prestige, this time in the form of the National Heavyweight Championship. Alright, guess that works. I will admit, I did get a kick out of this segment where he was dressing up the reason that he wears the mask and he compared it to May Valentine covering herself in tattoos, saying that she doesn't owe anyone an explanation for why she looks the way she does. And May looks at her inked up arms and sort of nods her head in agreement, probably thinking, I mean, I just figured tattoos are cool, but sure, we'll go with that philosophical, hippy-dippy, mumbo-jumbo bullshit theory. By the way, what a way to compliment a girl. Don't ever explain why you look the way you do. That's not head-turning at all. Up next, we had the Rude Dudes taking on the Dirty Dildos. Decent enough action for a match totally centered around cartoon characters. JTG, I guess. But it wasn't bad. I did audibly laugh at the part in this match where Stanley got tagged in, and Fandango's immediate response was to grab Stanley and give him a warm, friendly hug in the corner. I guess Fandango needed some comforting after his PTSD kicked in from his time working with WWE. I have no idea. They all totally got lost in there by the end, but, I mean, aside from the last couple minutes, the match was mostly fine. Nothing more to really say about it. Aaron Stevens did something resembling a promo at the booth with Kyle Davis. I won't even try to make sense of it or reiterate anything that was said. Just go with my word that it was as uncomfortable as watching Stevens continue to wear guy liner on camera. Tyra squashed Jaden Roller in a quick TV title match. Again, nothing really to note about that one. Then we had the Scion Judice match. We did get some speculation during this from Joe Galley that Scion could possibly be, of all names, get this, the first name that comes to Joe Galley's mind, Ronnie Garvin. I can assure you all, Scion is not Ronnie Garvin. In fact, unless someone shows up on this program dressed in drag, I'm pretty much guaranteed it's not Ronnie Garvin. I was also unfortunately reminded during this match that because it includes Jay Mitchell and Judice, we're probably going to have a Sal Renaro appearance, and sure as shit we did. Still trying to gain the approval of Mitchell. And having watched that horrific segment a few weeks ago where Sal was out there drinking fake blood, I kind of hoped they would have dropped that story altogether, but nope, Sal's still around being weird. And in a finish that I actually had to rewind and watch again because not only did I miss it the first time, but it happened so fast and inexplicably, I couldn't even make sense of anything that happened until I went back and watched it again. The finish is Judice grabbing a hold of Sal and voluntarily press slamming him onto Scion for the DQ finish. And I have no idea what prompted Judice to deciding to fuck himself out of winning his own match, but there you have it. And I guess Scion is well on his way that he's proving himself worthy of a future national championship opportunity. Winning a match by DQ because your opponent threw another guy on top of you to cost himself the match when he was probably on the cusp of winning anyway. Sounds like a WWE finish to me. In our main event for the show, it is Matt Cardona and Mike Knox versus Strictly Business versus Tim Storm and Trevor Murdoch. Again, multi-matches are typically not my flavor, mostly because they usually turn into muddled messes by the end. Thankfully, they kept this one pretty basic. It was a fun little main event. Good story with Cardona playing chicken shit, trying to avoid Trevor for most of it, only tagging in when other guys were getting the heat on him. Tim Storm made a nice little fiery comeback at the end. Usual deal with things briefly breaking down, everyone going in to hit a big move one at a time. And after Storm hit the black hole slam on Tom, Cardona ran in and hit him with the Rough Rider for the 3. Still not exactly sure what the purpose of having Strictly Business in the match was, especially if they were going to have Tim Storm take the fall anyway. But The clear program is Trevor and Cardona for the NWA title. I mean, again, not my first choice of a title program, but for something in the short term, I can accept it. It was an adequate finish to the show. And they packed a lot of action into the hour. While I wouldn't say I hated the show, because I really didn't, when I look back at it, there really wasn't a whole lot that I took away from it. Some of the booking and the promo material on the episode kind of felt all over the place and, I don't know, very discombobulated. And I've seen NWA suffer with this issue before where, they put together some ideas for segments on their shows and sometimes they stick well, other times they flop really hard. This one felt like it had more flops than normal. It's like a lot of the problems I have with AEW's booking, where a lot of the time, it feels like everyone's trying to get too creative and too cute with their segments instead of just trying to keep things plain and fundamental. And yeah, I understand. Some people are going to interpret that as, oh, so you want boring then. Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I want, first and foremost, is I want logical, competent wrestling programming. And, God knows in today's product that's few and far between. But, sometimes competent wrestling means that in order to get to that point, you have to simplify the stuff that you do to get your segments to come across effectively on TV. Again, it's a cheap reference point because we're talking about the shows now, but look at the classic content that we've been reviewing as part of the Retro series each Friday. Yes, things are very formulaic with the shows, especially the old NWA studio shows. And yes, sometimes things are boring in delivery and they may not make for the most exciting programming from top to bottom. But is that necessarily a bad thing? I know so many people are spoiled by the whole Crash TV era of wrestling, and we've sort of associated the glory days of wrestling with that period because, let's be honest, that's the real last good period of wrestling in recent history. But, I think we should also remember, too, that, the late 90s wasn't a perfect era for television programming by any stretch. And yes, we did get some great classic moments during that time, but we also got a lot of straight-up garbage every week. And I know that's controversial, but, exciting, compelling, all-action wrestling television, it's good to have in spurts, but, you also need a healthy balance of logical story progression and button-down seriousness, too. And that was something that kind of felt missing from the NWA this week. Too much of the former and not enough of the latter. So I know I'm already a week late to the party with this one, but last week was already packed for the Monday podcast, and I didn't even get around to checking out anything from the Wrestle Kingdom 16 until midway through this past week. Even though I usually come and go through phases with New Japan throughout the year, whether it's the G1 Climax, the Wrestle Kingdom shows, or some of the big featured matches for shows that they have and that I want to check out in my free time, i.e. Jon Moxley and Minoru Suzuki from a couple years back, I pretty much made the call as late as October of last year that, regardless of the fallout from the G1, I probably wasn't going to watch the Wrestle Kingdom 16 show in its entirety. One, because the show ended up being 3 nights, and ain't nobody got time for that. And secondly, I really haven't been all that intrigued with much of anything I've seen with New Japan since basically pre-pandemic. However, I do check the wrestling news occasionally, and I knew that since the Wrestle Kingdom event was going to get some amount of publicity, I'd figure there'd probably be a couple match recommendations from people or, some artificial newfound 8 3/4 star Dave Meltzer match that's a must-see. So I let the dust settle over the last few days, and after going over a few sources for what people viewed as the better match of the show, most of what I found is that people were pretty high on 2 particular matches. The Okada Shingo match from night 1, where Okada won the belt, and the Okada Will Ospreay match from night 2, which most people said was the better wrestling match. And because I love busting people's balls, I decided, okay, let's see just how great this Okada Ospreay match really was. Let's see if it's an actual 6-star match or whatever Meltzer rated it as. Maybe it was slightly under that. I can't remember. Maybe like 5 3/4. Who gives a fuck? Point is, it probably won't be in my book, but at least I can check the match out and see what I take away from it. If you've watched my podcast before, you already have a general consensus on the kind of wrestling I like, so I'm not going to get into that whole spiel now. The bullet point version is, the less choreographed ballet dance level routine stuff I see, the more I'll probably like the match. So in 2022, we're talking maybe 8 to 10% of the actual wrestling matches that take place. So first, let me start with a couple asterisks here, because I think we should establish something out of the gate when it comes to Okada and Ospreay. Okada has always been very hit and miss with me in terms of his matches. I've seen him do some really great stuff in his matches when it comes to basics and fundamentals, and I've also seen him do a lot of moderate, fake-looking, indie-level garbage in his matches too. Generally, I wouldn't say that I'm not a fan of his work, but I also wouldn't go out of my way to reference him for matches worth checking out if people would ask me for, like, a list of match recommendations. He's not on my go-to list. Ospreay kind of fits in that same boat as Okada, although I think I'm a little more lenient with Okada's work than I am Ospreay. Ospreay does a lot of acrobatic gymnast stuff, and a lot of it looks great. Most of it's just really not my flavor of wrestling. That said, he has his moments too, and when he's in there with the right opponent, he can be very enjoyable to watch. Again, I always go back and use this reference, but it's modern enough where I think it's relevant. That G1 match he had a couple years ago with Lance Archer is still one of my favorite Will Ospreay matches I've ever seen. I know a lot of people still have fond memories of that one match he had with Ricochet some odd years ago where it was nothing but routine acro stunts. And again, if that's stuff you dig, great. But if I wanted to watch ballet dance theater, I'll just renew my season tickets for the Pittsburgh Ballet, and I'll watch talented dancers and listen to the PSO Pit Orchestra. When I tune in to watch wrestling, I want to watch fucking wrestling. So, there's a little brief tangent on that. And I am moderately cognizant of the backstory going into the match. I remember the deal last year where Ospreay had to relinquish the IWGP title after he beat Ibushi. And Kevin Kelly had mentioned the whole thing going in where Ospreay declined the offer to enter last year's G1. And I guess the story with him right now is that he's claiming to be the real world's heavyweight champion, despite the fact that he's never been pinned or submitted for the belt. And going into the match, he was sporting his version of the IWGP title while still claiming the version that Okada had wasn't the real belt. And I did get a kick out of the stuff at the beginning where, Red Shoes walked over to present him with Okada's version of the belt, and Ospreay just went, "That's a fake belt. I don't want that one." So again, story stuff I'm a little shaky on, but I think I got that timeline mostly right. Now, when it comes to the match here, obviously the first thing that immediately sticks out is the crowd interaction. Or lack thereof, I should mention. And, yeah, it sucks. It's completely preposterous at this point, and I'll say this, man, as many ongoing problems as we've got going on in America today, at least we can say this: fans are allowed to actually fucking cheer and be fans when they're paying tickets for these events. And yes, morons, I know the restrictions are COVID related, which is why the Japanese crowd are only allowed to clap. Yeah, I'm just saying, you'd figure after almost 3 years of this horse shit, you'd figure after, doing some kind of analysis of the statistics, seeing that there's somewhere between a 97 to 99% recovery rate for anyone that actually gets infected, kind of just figure, oh, well, maybe people should get vaccinated, and if they feel they're at health risk, go for it. Other than that, we can go back to normal life. And I could have told you that as soon as they started distributing the initial vaccines, but what do I know? I'm just an average moron trying not to let authoritarian, power-hungry anarchists govern my life. So, again, to some, everything is still stupid, and people are still stupid. But let's talk about the match, because I watched it in full, took down some notes, and I already kind of went in with relatively low expectations, figuring I was not going to be blown away like all the Meltzer cucks out there would be. But I definitely went in with an open mind. And a lot of it turned out how I feel about a lot of New Japan Pro Wrestling matches in recent times. Had some good moments, had the usual what the fuck moments that makes everything about modern wrestling dumb. Sort of a grab bag of all kinds of things. Let's start with some of the good stuff. Kind of already touched on the Ospreay stuff at the beginning where he was dissing the real IWGP belt for his fake replica belt. And Ospreay definitely had his moments in this match where he was carrying himself like a heel. Problem is he doesn't really wrestle like a heel, so it makes it hard to buy into his character. Ospreay did one of the coolest spinning backbreaker moves I think I've ever seen. Kind of looked like a modified version of an airplane spin, except instead of Ospreay holding the guy up on his shoulders, he was holding Okada to the side in like a sidewalk slam position. Looked really cool. Okada still has the best drop kicks I've seen. I love the spot toward like the midway point where Ospreay was coming off the ropes. Okada tried for the drop kick, and then Ospreay caught him and then spiked him for the powerbomb. Would have been a great finishing spot, but you know. I was also hesitant to credit them on the forearm exchanges because those are always very hit and miss for me as too. But that part at the end where Okada was laying in the shots into Ospreay, I mean, they look good enough to where I could buy them as legit. So that was well done. In terms of other aspects of the match, it was back and forth for a lot of it, but that was fine with me. There were at least long enough periods in the match where guys were on offense and it didn't look like it was just a bullshit 50-50 match. I think they were trying to play up a lot of it with Ospreay having more of the upper hand. And, given the track record with Ospreay going in, I think they said something like he was like 1-5 going up against Okada. I think they did a relatively good job, making Ospreay seem like he had control of a lot of the match. And like I said, even though Ospreay works his offense like a total babyface with all the flashy moves and the high-risk dives, I mean, he does have pretty good facials for a heel. And, the heel stuff he did with playing into the crowd was good, even though no one was allowed to react to it. So, again, there were things that I liked about this match. In terms of things I didn't like, as a whole, my main overall criticism of the match, again, reverts back to much of my problems with modern wrestling matches today. This is not just exclusive to New Japan. Way too much emphasis on big moves, not enough attention to detail. Selling in this match was all over the place. Like, for a while, they were playing up the story with Okada selling a bad knee. And, I mean, that all really started when Okada tried for that running dive over the guardrail, and then Ospreay caught him with the drop kick coming down. And, of course, you fast forward 5 minutes from there, Okada's completely fine on his bum knee, and he's hitting every move in the book. Just stupid. And New Japan matches have a lot of spots where guys take harder bumps on their heads and necks, so I always kind of shake my head at the spots where guys get dumped overhead onto their heads and necks, and then they're immediately springing back up to their feet to hit another big move. Just, it's fucking dumb. Kind of on the same topic as the selling stuff, but, I see more of this too in New Japan than I do any other product. It carries over in AEW to an extent, but like the constant stream of 500 move reversals in a row, especially when the guys are doing it at the part of the match where they should be selling the fatigue. But the whole series of sequences where guys are ducking clotheslines and flipping over each other and playing hopscotch and twister with one another, that stuff is just, gets too excessive. One or two back and forth reversals followed by a big move, okay. Then you both go down, you sell it for a little bit, you both get back up to your feet. Maybe you do a couple reversals there and then another big move and then you sell. I can buy that. But like the stream of going through 7 or 8 counters and reversals where it clearly looks like they're all going through a chain of choreography to get from point A to point B to point C. Like, that stuff is just awful. I think the spot most equated with this match was the moonsault press off the scaffolding fixture that Ospreay did to Okada. And it was a beautiful looking moonsault. Didn't make a fucking lick of sense to do the move in the first place if Ospreay's supposed to be a heel, but it looked great. On top of that, it was also one of those stupid dive spots where Ospreay doesn't look to make sure Okada's in his line of sight before actually doing the dive. So, it just throws all believability out the window when you realize that, Okada has to be standing there to catch him, which, almost didn't happen. I should point that out, too. Also, another spot that probably should have been the finish, or at least set up to the finish. But no, it was a moonsault dive within the first 10 minutes of the match that led to 20 plus more minutes of more moves. Love that. Some other minor gripes and nitpicks I could maybe throw in there, but, those are the ones that stood out to me. Generally, I would say it was a very good match. Again, a lot of material in there that's iffy with me, but guys worked hard. The story was told well throughout. Even though the match went a little over 30 minutes, it never dragged. That's always a good sign, especially when guys are going in longer matches. Sometimes if they don't pace it well, it can start to feel like it gets a little excessive early on. But, yeah. So like I said, there were things I enjoyed about it. Selling and timing, that's always an issue I have with a lot of these bigger New Japan matches. When guys get too focused on the big flashy moves, sometimes they end up forgetting some of the most rudimentary basics when it comes to the art of what makes professional wrestling great. There were times watching this match where it felt like I was watching a heated blood feud, and other times where I'm sitting there wondering, why is Okada no-selling his left knee when he was just selling it 10 minutes ago? Why is Will Ospreay hitting shooting star presses and corkscrew dives if he supposedly has a bad back going into the match? Just small things that may seem mundane, but, I noticed them. So if I notice them, I can't be the only one. It's one of those things that it evidently calls into question the credibility of what the guys are doing. Again, if the kind of wrestling that you like is geared toward more of the flips, more of the acrobatics, more of the whole spectacle of the move matter, I understand why you thought this match was great, because there were a lot of great elements to it. But keeping in mind that we're also supposed to view this as professional wrestling, and that I'm supposed to take this seriously, you can't just expect me to overlook and gloss over details like that, because everyone else is going to. But if I'm trying to suspend a little bit of disbelief here, I'm going to notice these things. Again, I've been watching this shit for over 25 years, so I know what good wrestling is when I see it, and I know what bad wrestling is when I see it. In terms of Okada winning, that's more so going to depend on whether or not you're sick of Okada as the champion by now. I never thought much of Shingo as the champion during the G1, so it never bothered me seeing and reading that Okada beat him on night 1. Is it old news at this point? Yeah, you could probably say that. Obviously with the way things are, New Japan really has a big problem when it comes to star power. And I even remember talking about this at the tail end of my G1 recap last year. Some of their bigger names from the States are not accessible right now. New Japan's roster is pretty gutted, and especially when it comes to fresh uprising talent. And even with the experimentation of running with guys like Evil and Shingo in those top spots, they haven't exactly done the company any favors. But Okada's a reliable go-to for them in that top title picture. He usually delivers quality main event matches, and depending on how long Ibushi's going to be out of action when he went down with that injury last year, they at least have a guaranteed title program that they could build towards with Okada and Ibushi to kind of settle that unresolved finale from the G1 last year. If that's the direction they want to go. We don't really even know. So, there's my recap of the Ospreay-Okada showdown. Very good match with modern day wrestling things that I didn't like about it. Would it end up making my match of the year list? Perhaps somewhere in the upper echelon of the top 20. But I don't know about the top 10 right now. I guess we'll see how good things get for the remainder of the year. But I'll keep my eyes posted with New Japan, because if there is a match worth checking out or anything with upcoming shows that have bigger featured matches worth seeing, I will go out of my way to check them out. I always do. My plan is to definitely recap the G1 again this year, but in the meantime, New Japan coverage will kind of be on a grab-and-go scenario for the time being. And again, if y'all want to keep posted with the FSWR podcast each week, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate the show down below. Again, we will be back this coming Friday for the continuation of our retro review series on World Championship Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling, with the usual Dynamite rundown. Hopefully with more to talk about than that bore fest we got this past week with Rampage. Until then, take care all. Peace out.